Okay, so I created a new class called for loop, and we're going to explore in a little more detail the for loop. So let's take a look at creating a for loop. Now remember there's three parts. There is a part that we first create sort of the initialization of a variable. So I'm going to type int I equals 0. And remember that you can also type int I here, say that equals 0 here. And you won't have to initialize it here. Say I here. That's sort of saying the same thing. And I say I is done. I'm going to increment I. And then let's take a look at printing it out in two ways. So if I just write print line here, and then within the parentheses, I write the letter I, and I hit F11. Oh, I think we still have to initialize, I'm sorry. So we still have to assign it a value here, because it's inside the for loop. So really, we can give it a data type here, and then initialize it there. So you can see that I'm printing the letter I 10 times, or I just do I, and then I hit F11, and I'm actually printing the values 0 through 9. Now, if you want, you can start I off at 1, right? And I can say, as long as I is less than 10. Now imagine I put 11 here, you'll see that I get 1 through 10. So, because again, I has to be less than 11. Or I can do I is less than or equal to 10, and I can run that. Oops, looks like error here. Oh, it's less than or equal to 10, that's why. So we get 1 through 10 that way as well. So you can also create two conditions. So I can say j here equals 10, but you're going to see I'm getting an error here because I have to initialize them both as integers there. And I also have to say, separate that with a comma. If I equals 1 and j equals 10, and I could say as long as I is less than or equal to 10, I'm going to increment I, and I'm going to decrement j by 1. So I'm going to system.println I, and I'm just going to do plus a space plus j, and then hit F11 here, and you can see I get 10, 9, 8 all the way to 1, and then 1 through 10. Let's take a look at creating sort of a never-ending loop here by checking the value of a character. So I'm just going to write here throws IO exception. We have to import our IO, Java IO exception here to make sure that this works. And what I'm going to say here is, let's go ahead and delete this for loop and start with one from scratch. And all I'm going to say here is, we'll keep that integer I, and we'll say system.out.println say press S to stop. And then what we just say here is for I is equal to 0. So it's actually just, I always like to create it so I don't mess it up, like the body of a for loop. So what we can do is we can say for I is equal to 0, semicolon. And then we're going to typecast the response. We're going to make sure that the character, and then we're actually going to read in system.read, system.in.read. We're going to check our condition. So before we had I is less than 1, we're just going to say if the character that we read in is not equal to S, that, we're going to increment I. So we'll just system.out.println And we're just going to print out I. Alright, so let's go ahead and hit F11 here. I think that error. Right. You can see I'm just typing in letters here. So D, G, keeps going, and I've hit S to stop. Or Shift S to stop, because I did capital letter S. You can see it exited me out of the program. But otherwise, like, as long as I keep entering a letter, it's just going to keep printing out I, or keep counting. You can see it did 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it kept incrementing it as long as I kept entering a letter, because it's just checking the condition here. Alright, so let's look at another way of doing this. We can oftentimes, we can create for loops without a body. So for example, we have a for loop here for, let's do this. We'll say as long as I is less than or equal to 5, right? We'll actually, instead of our counter being I++, we'll do sum. We'll have to declare this variable. So I can say int sum equals sum plus I++. Actually, let's do this. Let's declare this. Let's set this to 0 up here. And then I'm going to end this with a semicolon. So what's happening here is, as long as I is less than 0, give this a data type. So as long as I is less than or equal to 5, sum equals whatever the incremented I is, right? So let's just go ahead and print that out so you can see the value that we get. Like we have an extra curly brace here we don't need. Put a space here. Alright, so let's look at how this program works. Sum is 15. So what we're doing here is we're not actually continuously running a loop, but we're running this condition over and over again until the I, which is this value here, which starts at 0, is equal to or less than 5. And we're incrementing this 5 times. So what we're really doing here is by adding, we're saying sum starts off at 0. We're saying sum is equal to sum plus I. So constantly sum will be entering the value of I. So if it starts off at 0, we start at 0. Then it goes to 1. And then 1 plus 2 is 3, right? And then the next value is 2, so 3 plus 2 is 5. And then so on until we reach 15.